Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Everybody, this is Anthony Murdock, and I met him at a webinar what was the webinar about? It was about empowerment in
Yeah,
schools, or
empowering students of color with social emotional learning.
right? And I also got to meet some of his students. What are you? Who is Anthony Murdock? I guess is a good start to because when I met him, I felt very inspired, and I wanted to share him as a guiding light for empowerment and include him in the curriculum, the Dreamsmithing curriculum. So do you mind going ahead? And I will try not to talk very much because you probably have a lot more interesting things to say than I do.
No, thank you for the opportunity. I definitely appreciate it, and it's always a blessing when one blessing turns into another blessing, right? So we go from a webinar with a few hundred folks on there talking about how a model in the world's largest small city of Indianapolis, Indiana, is impacting students, and then you taking your experience there to impact even more people on the other side of the country. So again, thank you. But again, you talk about who is Anthony Murdock II. Murdock is a purpose-driven, action-oriented servant leader and proud product of Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm a Juris Doctorate candidate at the I.U. McKinney School of Law in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm also a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional. So I work in the law school's Office of Diversity and Inclusion as well. I have two different businesses, a for-profit company called Murdock LLC that's likely most pertinent to this conversation today, where we're empowering communities to leverage their influence and fuel efforts for Black liberation, in addition to a nonprofit that's about 2 or 3 seconds away for being an official 501c3 tax-exempt organization, which I'm excited for, where we are turning entrepreneurs into powerpreneurs, one power move at a time. And ultimately, right, Murdock is in the business of becoming the greatest powerpreneur Indianapolis has ever seen. And I use that term powerpreneur a few times as I talked about who I am. And basically a powerpreneur, like I mentioned during the webinar, is someone who is always constantly leveraging the power in their story, even when it gets gory, because it leads to profit surely. And that is what I seek to do in every partnership, every collaboration, every meeting, every relationship, every engagement. And it's understanding that first and foremost, there's power in my story. And why is there power in my story? Because your story is filled with words, and our words have power. Life and death, right? Line the power of the tongue. And so if my story is the culmination, the assemblage of words, it must be powerful. It is power, it is filled with words, all of which have power. And so when I understand that my story has power, I can use that power to oppress, suppress, and depress, or I can use it to work towards progress and success that is personal, inclusive, and purpose-driven. And so I'm constantly engaging in how to learn to leverage my power, right? That power in my story, even when it gets gory, even when things get difficult in life, to lead to profit surely. And that profit that I talk about is not the change in my pocket, but that social change that we can make in our communities. So that's who Murdock is. That's who I am.
You're looking for ways to invest in the community and grow with the community. I love that, and I really appreciated your thoughts about words and how important they are. I put a lot of emphasis on that in what I'm doing in the curriculum, and making sure that the people who are doing it are not skipping past anything that they could learn from and profit surely. So I love the alignment for sure.
No, something I say a lot is that Murdock's about we and not me. And there's not a moment I spend not thinking about us. And I say that because who I am, and even more than who I am, but the different communities that I'm a part of, or the communities that I work to create, it is not about a singular person, right? But then also it's not about me, right? When you talk to me, you're talking to a group of people, right? You're talking to a community. You're talking to an incredible history of trauma and triumph, as a good friend of mine, Micah Benson, would say. You are talking to so many people at one time because of a village, right? It takes a village to raise a child, right? And I'm a product of my environment, a proud product of my environment. And so when you engage with Murdock, with me. You are talking to we. And so when we talk about investing in yourself, the best for me to invest in me is to invest in we, my community.
Mhm.
And so I'm constantly engaged with that.
I love the connectivity and the sense of, I mean, there's a civic duty, but it's not like a governmental civic duty so much as just a sense of everybody being connected. And I'm very grateful for that. Who inspired you to become this powerpreneur? And then just in terms of maybe of 2 or 3 historical figures that really stand out. I'm just curious. Thanks.
No, great question. So when thinking about that, I have two that come to my mind off bat. So one, my oratorical mentor, uh, Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes III, which his name alone, right? Frederick Douglass Haynes III. Just that name carries so much weight. That name carries so much story. That name carries so much history.
The
That is
words.
that
Yeah.
is bold. That is beautiful. Yeah, and he's my oratorical mentor. And one of the reasons why is because, you know, like I said, so he's a reverend. He has a church out in Dallas, Texas, Friendship West, and me being a Christian black man, a young Christian black man, in many ways I understand my blackness through my Christianity. By that I mean, you know, Jesus to me wasn't just this, you know, savior that came down from heaven. He was a young black boy who was murdered by the state of Rome on a cross. He was crucified. And so when I see him and on that cross, I think about Trayvon Martin. I think about Michael Brown. I think about Tamir Rice. And that's the theological lens through which Reverend Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes III preaches through and he speaks through. And something he said on The Breakfast Club was that a text without context is merely a pretext for conning people. A text without context is merely a pretext for conning people. And what he meant by that was you can take something, whether we're talking about the Bible or a book or a snippet or whatever, you can take it, yes, and you can twist it and make it into whatever you want to. And in using that outside of the context in which it originates, you know, you can con so many people. And I knew that, but when he said it, it resonated differently because of who it was coming from, obviously. But also more so, it made me think about I cannot stop using my story, which is my story is the context of my life. I can't be ashamed of the context that I have because it's going to con me and thus we out of incredible opportunities to produce the change that we seek.
Mhm.
And the way in which he was able to word that, in addition to, you know, everything that he does, is generally something that inspires, that empowers, but motivates me to continue doing what I'm doing. So that's one I'd always mention. Another, you know, this is token, this is basic. My mom, you know, so in both of my companies, but much more specifically, Power Moves on the nonprofit, we actually have a program called Mover of the Year, where we highlight. It started as a monthly initiative, where every month we'd highlight a woman of color who is making power moves in her community, and now it's a banquet. So every year we have a banquet that honors a woman of color, and we raise money to seed money into entrepreneurs of color who are in college to help them grow their businesses. But it's all centered around appreciating this woman of color who is transcending so many systems to see success. Right. That's why the lioness is so central to our brand, and it's because a lioness doesn't get enough credit for what she does for the pride. Everybody knows about the lion because of the fact that it's yes, and all that it represents, its extravagant nature. People don't understand that without the lioness, they'd have no food. Who protects? Who hunts? The lioness does these things,
Mhm.
similar to the way in which the woman of color, especially the black woman, right, is so deeply underappreciated for what she does to literally make the world go round. And so when I apply that to my own personal life, that's a great theory, but I got to apply it personally in a very concrete way. And so when I think about what does that mean concretely for my life, that's my mom. And it's the fact that in many ways, she is the lioness of my life. That is what she has been in so many different ways. She's been the lioness of my life. And she has, in more ways than I can describe, um, been someone who, without the recognition that she deserves, without the appreciation that she deserves. She has continued to provide and to guide and to be a source of not just inspiration and empowerment, but motivation for me to see things in myself I've never seen before. And it's been a blessing to, as I've better understood my story, to work with her to appreciate hers. And I don't know if you ever had an experience like that, but that is profound. So when, to answer your question, right, those would have to be the two. Have to be Reverend Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes III, my oratorical mentor, also my mom. You know, she embodies powerpreneurship at a radical level.
When you are talking with the people that you're helping in Indy, just wondering, how do you bring that to them? Because I know for me, I find building rapport through story, like you were talking about, you know, I mean, story is so important, but how do you connect story wise, or, you know, when you're trying to get people to a point where they are, I mean, empower, how do you, what are the things you like to do to help your people that you're working with?
Yeah, so I think that's such a broad question, which I think is great, because there's a number of different ways you can go about doing it. But I think if there's anything that separates me from what a lot of other people do, and I talk this to a lot of my clients too, clients that I do one-on-one coaching with, I say that when we meet to talk about your purpose, I'm not creating something. I'm just helping you identify what's already there. We're going through a process of extraction, right? We are simply taking out what has already been placed inside of you. And my skill is not to create. My skill, I mean, I can't create, but my skill in this environment, in that dynamic, is to help you pull what's already inside of you, help you see things that you may not have seen before simply because of your frame of mind. Right? When we've been socialized to think that we're not worth anything, we've been socialized to think that we are incapable, socialized to think that we are less than. It takes someone who is not within that frame of reference to look and do an assessment of you and share that while this might be your norm, this is not normal. And so that is what I seek to be. Now, how do you do that, right? How do you do that? It starts very simply. And I'll say that, and I guess an advantage I have is the fact that this whether it's the students, the companies, the professionals that I serve, I look like them, right? So when you run that webinar, you know, you were talking to 17, 18, 19-year-olds. I'm 24. Now, my facial hair might suggest I'm a little bit older. I know my facial hair definitely ages me. But,
Yeah.
but it's a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
And so we're not speaking different languages. Something that one of those students said, and she and I actually mentioned it a lot, like when our one-on-one sessions, we talk about it all the time. This linguistic gap that perpetuates generational divides. And it's this idea that, and it makes sense. Like the music that my parents listen to, not the same music I listen to. The politics of the everyday of 2020 is not the same as it was in 1990. The things that were normal then are not normal. The things that were cool then are not cool now. Things change. And part of the position I'm in and why I work so hard to do so much now is because I understand I have a segment of time to make this kind of an impact. Where just by nature of walking into a room, there's a relationship. Because people who look like me, who dress like me, who talk like me, aren't supposed to be in those positions. And so now that I'm here, that's a place and space of connection off that. And again, that doesn't come with anything but saying, look, I watched the same music video you did yesterday. I thought it was fire just like you did. I rap the same lyrics you do when you taking a shower in the morning. I'm in the shower singing the same songs. The same music you listen to get hyped before you walk into school, I listen to as well. I listened to it before I came and spoke to you today. The same struggles that you feel like people don't understand where you're coming from because you're younger, or because you're Black, or because you're urban. The same things. I hate putting on ties, just like you hate putting on dresses. I hate feeling like I need to change my voice or change my story when I walk into a room, just like you do. I hate it. And I love a lot of the same things you do. And that's just by nature of being such proximal to our identity in that moment. And man, that's the first thing I do all the time. Let's just look. There are more things in common between the two of us than different. So I don't care. I don't know who framed this perspective, but I'm finna reframe it. Understand this is a conversation with you and yourself. Just look at me as a mirror of you. Talk to yourself right now. And that's how I start the conversations. And when you have the opportunity to talk to yourself and connect to yourself, when the other 8 hours of your day you're being corrected, you hungry just to be able to just have a moment of affirmation and validation. And that's what we bring. That's how you empower communities. That's how you fuel efforts of Black liberation. In a country that questions your competency, people just want to be able to connect. And we offer that connection to them.